Hello and welcome to the podcast. In the last couple of episodes, we looked at several cases where parts of a Leibniz manuscript were either not read at all or were read incorrectly. Today, we're going to consider a different kind of problem, a case where some of the words simply cannot be read because they have been lost due to damage to the manuscript. What we'll see is that even in a case like this, it can still be possible to determine what the missing words probably were. Today will be Reconstructing Leibniz. The text we're going to look at is called A Plan for Writing a Natural History. In it, Leibniz calls for the organization and encyclopedic systemization of the sciences. The manuscript itself presents no difficulties until we reach the very final sentence. At that point, you can see that the bottom of the page has frayed and several words have been lost as a result. Obviously, knowing Leibniz's orthography isn't going to help us here, nor will staring at the manuscript. But that doesn't mean that we have to accept that we'll never know what the final sentence says. In fact, it is possible to reconstruct the missing words and recover the sense of the passage. Let's begin by looking at how the text has been handled in the published transcription. So this is how the final sentence appears there. If we restricted ourselves to that transcription, we would probably never figure out what Leibniz intended to say. The missing words, marked with triangular brackets, are only part of the problem here. On top of that, the transcription is faulty in other ways that would make it very difficult, if not impossible, to reconstruct the sentence. To begin with, when we look at the manuscript, we can see a complete word, inter, that the transcription has missed entirely. The transcription also places the word fragilitatis much earlier in the sentence than it appears in the manuscript. And it ignores the fact that Leibniz underlined certain words for emphasis. Once we correct these problems, we arrive at a much more reliable starting point. So this is what we have now. Even at this stage, we can already see what Leibniz is talking about. The sentence concerns the recording and classifying of observations. And this is very helpful because it sharply limits the range of plausible words that could fill the gaps. Looking at the grammar of the sentence, we can also determine the forms the missing words must take. The first missing word must be a plural noun in the accusative case, and the second must be a verb in the infinitive, or possibly a passive infinitive. So let's start with the missing noun. In the latter part of the sentence, Leibniz is listing relationships. Look at the nouns that appear before the missing ones. Qualities of brass, effects of heat, and then something of brittleness. And if we go back to the beginning of the sentence where Leibniz notes that heat makes brass brittle, we can see him saying heat is a cause of brittleness. Given that context, it's quite natural to suppose that the missing plural noun in the list of relationship is the Latin causas, causes. This is actually a nice fit, as it would also reflect a common rhetorical pairing, effects and causes. Now let's think about the missing verb. The clause begins with inter, which means among. When we say that some fact should be something among a set of qualities and effects, the most natural verb is one meaning to be listed, counted, or reckoned. And with that in mind, I propose the Latin enumerare, which means to be enumerated or to be listed. And putting these pieces together, we now have a reconstruction of the final sentence. The two words in square brackets are our proposed reconstructions. Once they are supplied, the sentence becomes clear and coherent, with Leibniz saying, thus that brass is made brittle by heat should be listed among the qualities of brass and the effects of heat and the causes of brittleness. Of course, we cannot be absolutely certain that these are the exact words Leibniz wrote, so we'll have to keep the square brackets to indicate that these words are editorial reconstructions. Still, we now have a final sentence that makes sense, and one in which we can have a fairly high degree of confidence. Thank you for your kind attention. In next week's podcast, we'll be looking at the previously unpublished text included in the new 3-volume edition of Leibniz's philosophical papers. We'll be unearthing Leibniz.